Devin Reynolds, a successful black architect and devoted single father, stood tall in his impeccably tailored suit as a wave of applause swept through the airport terminal. The very flight attendant who had discriminated against him now stood, pale-faced, while the airline's CEO offered a personal apology. One phone call had changed everything. But how did it come to this? Before we unravel this remarkable story, drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from, and if you believe in standing against injustice. Hit that like button. Subscribe for more inspiring stories of courage and resilience. Let's rewind to where it all began. Devin adjusted his burgundy tie in the mirror, staring at the reflection of a man who had become an expert at balancing parallel worlds. At 42, he had built a celebrated career in sustainable urban design, with his innovative architecture shaping city skylines nationwide. Yet, no professional accomplishment could rival his most important role, being a father to 8. Zoe. Dad, did you pack my blue sweater? The one with the silver stars? Zoe's voice called from her bedroom, bright and clear in their sun-drenched Atlanta home. It's already in your suitcase, right next to your books and that dolphin you refused to leave behind, Devin called back, a smile tugging at his lips despite the ever-present weight he carried. 3 years had passed since cancer took Jessica, leaving him to navigate single parenthood. The searing grief had dulled, but sharp pangs still surfaced in unexpected moments, like when Zoe tilted her head in a way that so closely mirrored her mother. "We're going to have the best time in Seattle," Devin promised as Zoe burst into his room, her curls bouncing. "The client meeting's just for one day, then we've got the whole weekend to explore." The trip was both business and a much-needed getaway. Riverfront Development Corporation wanted Devin's firm to design their new headquarters, a contract that could redefine his career. Scheduling it during Zoe's spring break meant they could turn the trip into an adventure. "Will we see whales?" Zoe asked, eyes wide with hope. "I booked us a whale-watching tour for Saturday," Devin confirmed, delighting in her squeal of excitement. What he didn't mention was how much he'd agonized over the decision to book first-class tickets. It was an indulgence, one his father, a postal worker, and his mother, an elementary school teacher, could scarcely have imagined. But after a difficult year of school transitions, single parenting, and relentless project deadlines, he felt they deserved it. It was more than a luxury. It was a statement. Growing up, Devin's parents had emphasized education as the gateway to a better life. When he earned a scholarship to Cornell's architecture program, it was validation for their sacrifices. Being one of only 4 black students in his class had taught Devin invaluable lessons about existing in spaces not built for him, about excelling quietly and working twice as hard for half the recognition. His closest friendship from those days remained Theodore Washington, his former roommate and now a nationally respected civil rights attorney. "We're building different kinds of structures," Theodore often said. "You're designing spaces for everyone. I'm breaking down the walls that keep people out." A text from Theodore buzzed on Devin's phone. "Kill it in Seattle. Court case wrapped early. Call if you need anything." Devin smiled at the message. Theodore had been a rock after Jessica's passing, handling logistics, comforting Zoe, and offering steady friendship when Devin was barely holding himself together. He thought of the promise he'd made to Jessica in those final days. She'd gripped his hand, her voice faint but firm. "Give her every opportunity, Dev. Don't let the world tell her she can't." And he intended to keep that promise, no matter how many obstacles the world placed in their path. Just last week, a new neighbor had mistaken him for a delivery driver. A security guard at a luxury store shadowed them as they shopped for a dress. A hostess at their favorite restaurant routinely tried to seat them near the kitchen. These weren't isolated incidents. They were daily reminders of the barriers still standing. But Devin was determined to shield Zoe from those realities for as long as he could, to raise her confident, unafraid, and secure in her worth. "Dad, I packed my science journal, Zoe declared, dragging her small purple suitcase into his room. I want to take notes on all the sea creatures we see. That's my girl, Devon said proudly. Zoe's fascination with marine biology had blossomed over the past year. Her bedroom walls were filled with posters of coral reefs and dolphins, rather than the princesses and unicorns her friends adored. The morning of their flight arrived, clear and bright. Devon and Zoe moved through their routine with practiced ease, smoothies for breakfast, a final check of documents, and Zoe's favorite travel playlist playing as they loaded up the car. First class is going to be amazing, Zoe beamed. Madison from school says her dad flies first class and they give you warm cookies and real glass cups. Devon chuckled. I'm not sure about the cookies, but it'll definitely be more comfortable than our usual seats. What he left unsaid was that this trip, this seat, this experience wasn't just about comfort. It was about belonging, about claiming space in places where people like him were too often made to feel invisible. As he pulled into the airport parking deck, a familiar flicker of unease stirred in his stomach. They were about to board a flight that neither of them would ever forget. Public spaces always carried a certain weight for Devon, an unspoken tension, the constant need to be hyper-aware, to ensure his behavior was irreproachable. But watching Zoe's excited face in the rearview mirror, he pushed those thoughts aside. Today wasn't about navigating microaggressions. Today was about making memories. Seattle, here we come, he said, helping Zoe with her backpack, ready for an adventure. Her enthusiastic nod warmed him. For her, he would face whatever the day held. The Atlanta airport buzzed with the energy of early summer travel. Families herded excited kids toward gates, business travelers moved with practiced urgency, and airport staff kept the carefully controlled chaos in motion. Devon guided Zoe toward the premium check-in area, her small hand secure in his. The first-class line was nearly empty compared to the long, winding queues of economy travelers. As they approached the counter, Devon noticed the attendant's gaze flicker between him and Zoe, a brief flash of confusion before her face settled into a polite, neutral mask. Good morning, Devon greeted, sliding over their passports. And confirmation. Reynolds, Devon, and Zoe. 9:15 to Seattle. The attendant, Brenda, according to her nameplate, tapped at her keyboard. Are you both flying first class today? She asked, the emphasis subtle but unmistakable. Yes, Devon replied, his tone even. That's what I booked. Her fingers paused over the keyboard just a beat too long before she continued processing their check-in. Beside him, Zoe bounced, on her toes, happily oblivious to the undercurrent. Dad, can we get breakfast after this? I can smell those cinnamon rolls, she said eagerly. Absolutely, Devon promised. Grateful for the distraction. Boarding passes in hand, they made their way toward security, where the real tension usually began. Even with TSA pre-check printed clearly on their tickets, when Devon guided Zoe toward the dedicated lane, an agent held up a hand. Sir, this line's for pre-check passengers. We have pre-check, Devon replied calmly, pointing to the designation on their boarding passes. The agent took their documents, examining them with slow, exaggerated care. ID, please. Devon handed over their passports. The agent glanced between the documents and their faces several times before asking, This your daughter? Yes, Devon answered, keeping his voice measured. As you can see, matching passports. After an uncomfortable pause, they were waved through, only to be immediately pulled aside for random additional screening, while the white family behind them breezed through without pause. Daddy, Zoe whispered, puzzled, why do we have to do extra steps? Sometimes the system picks people at random, Devon told her, repeating a lie he'd had to perfect over the years. It's to help keep everyone safe. As a TSA agent waved a wand around his body, Devon kept his expression neutral, silently. reciting the mantra that had carried him through so many moments like this. This isn't personal. It's the system. Stay dignified. Show her strength. His mind flashed to a memory, Zoe's 7th birthday, when he'd taken her to Caldwell's, an upscale restaurant, hoping to give her a special night. Despite having a reservation, they'd been seated near the bathrooms while tables by the window remained empty. When he'd politely questioned it, the manager suggested perhaps they'd be more comfortable at a family-friendly chain down the street. Zoe had cried on the drive home, somehow sensing, even at her age, that they'd been made to feel lesser. That night, Devon made himself a promise: never again. Devon refused to let Zoe witness him humiliated. He would navigate these moments with grace, tempered by firmness, showing her how to stand tall in a world that sometimes tried to make them small. All clear, the TSA agent finally declared, sliding their belongings toward them as they gathered their things. An elderly white couple in the next lane smiled kindly at them. "What a smart young lady," the woman said, having overheard Zoe's enthusiastic chatter about marine biology. "Are you going to be a scientist when you grow up, sweetheart?" "A marine biologist," Zoe corrected, with the unwavering confidence of someone proud of a new, impressive word. "I want to study whale communication." "Well, you're certainly articulate enough for it," the man added, a compliment, laced with the familiar, backhanded surprise at her eloquence. Devon offered a polite nod and gently steered Zoe away toward their gate. He glanced at his watch, still time for that promised cinnamon roll before boarding. At the Cinnabon kiosk, Zoe happily devoured her treat, while Devon sipped his coffee and quietly reviewed his notes for the Seattle presentation. These simple moments were precious to him, brief islands of normalcy in the sea of careful vigilance that colored so many of their public outings. Flight 1482 to Seattle, now boarding first class and priority passengers. The announcement crackled through the speakers. They gathered their things and made their way to the gate, IDs and boarding passes in hand. A small line had formed for first class, mostly business travelers in tailored suits and a few older couples. Devon and Zoe took their place, Zoe clutching her beloved stuffed dolphin. Captain Finn, the same companion she'd held through hospital visits and bedtime stories during Jessica's final months. The gate agent, a blonde woman named Veronica, Winters according to her badge, scanned the boarding pass of the businessman ahead of them with a bright, practiced smile. "Enjoy your flight, Mr. Whitfield." But when Devon stepped forward with Zoe, Veronica's smile faded, tightening at the corners. "Boarding passes and IDs, please." Devon handed them over without hesitation, anticipating the request. Veronica studied their documents a little too long, her eyes flicking between the passports and their faces. "Are you both in first class?" she asked, repeating the same question they'd already heard at check-in. "Yes," Devon confirmed calmly. "Seats 3A and 3B. Her frown barely registered, but it was there. "One moment, please." She turned and beckoned to her colleague at the adjacent economy line, a young man named Connor, his name badge catching the light. The two whispered in hushed tones. Zoe's small hand tightened in Devon's, her excitement replaced by unease. Behind them, passengers shifted and sighed impatiently. "Is there a problem?" Devon asked, his voice controlled, firm without raising. "Just confirming something," Veronica replied, still avoiding eye contact, murmuring again with Connor. The young man shrugged and turned back to his podium. After a beat, Veronica turned to Devon with a forced smile. "Are you sure you're in the right line? This lane is for first-class boarding." Devon's jaw tensed almost imperceptibly. "Yes," he replied evenly, "as clearly marked on our boarding passes, which you're holding." The line behind them had grown, passengers exchanging glances and impatient murmurs. Devon caught a few sideways looks and eye rolls, whether directed at him, the delay, or the awkwardness of the moment, he couldn't say. For years, Zoe had accepted the microaggressions and outright aggressions as the unspoken cost of success. Every side eye, every loaded comment, every condescending apology, tucked away and swallowed for the sake of upward mobility. But as she stared at the hollow apology email, now glowing on her screen, something within her shifted. The presentation had been flawless. The promotion was practically promised. Richard's knowing smiles and pointed questions about future leadership opportunities, leaving little doubt. Yet Zoe found herself asking, at what cost? For the first time, she wondered if success had to mean sacrificing pieces of her humanity. Was there another way forward? One that didn't require daily compromises to dignity? One that might actually change the path for those who'd follow her? Little did she know, events already in motion would soon force her to choose. At 6:30 a.m., her alarm startled her awake. The celebratory dinner with Pinnacle's executives felt like a distant memory. The sting of the flight incident had dulled under the warm buzz of career triumph. But that peace shattered the moment Zoe picked up her phone. 57 missed calls, hundreds of texts, thousands of social media notifications, and one video shared millions of times overnight. It bore the caption, "Black executive racially profiled on flight to Chicago. #flying while black." Zoe's hands trembled as she hit play. The entire confrontation was captured in high definition. Heather's thinly veiled contempt, Captain Stevens' patronizing dismissal, the accumulation of humiliations, every look, every accusation, every moment, recorded for the world. Worse still, the person who uploaded the video had included her full name. She was instantly identifiable. Scrolling through the comments, Zoe saw herself in the flood of responses. Thousands of black travelers recounting eerily similar stories. Professionals detailing the casual cruelties of being presumed out of place. The hashtag flying while black had gone viral overnight, igniting a national conversation about racial profiling in air travel. Her phone rang. "Patricia Washington, have you seen it?" Patricia asked. "No pleasantries, just weary urgency. I just woke up to it," Zoe replied, still numb. "I don't know what to do. The company PR team's already in damage control. They want you in Richard's office at 8. Damage control?" Zoe's voice cracked. "I didn't do anything wrong." "I know," Patricia said quietly, her tone carrying the weight of hard-earned wisdom. "But Pinnacle's got a $5 million corporate travel contract with that airline. And this puts them in a bind." The implication hit Zoe like a physical blow. The promotion, so close she could taste it, might slip through her fingers, not because she'd made a mistake, but because she'd dared to exist visibly, vulnerably, while black in a space someone else had decided she didn't belong. "What would you do?" Zoe asked, trusting Patricia's decades of experience navigating corporate America's unspoken codes. There was a long pause. "In my day," Patricia began slowly, "I would have kept my head down, stayed quiet, protected my position. That was survival. But times are different now, Zoe. You have options." For the first time in a long while, Zoe allowed herself to wonder what it might look like to choose herself fully, publicly, unapologetically. But Devin knew what this was, and he wasn't about to shrink. "I wanted to see," Zoe said, perking up as she scrolled through the in-flight entertainment menu. "That's great, sweetheart," Devin replied, grateful for the distraction. "Maybe we can watch it together once we're in the air." Veronica, one of the first-class flight attendants, moved briskly through the cabin, offering pre-departure beverages. A warm smile for the elderly couple in row 1. A casual joke about golf scores for the businessmen in row 2. When she reached their row, her demeanor shifted, cooled. "Anything to drink before takeoff?" she asked, her gaze flicking past Devin and Zoe, landing on Gerald Whitfield in the window seat. "Orange juice for my daughter, please. And coffee for me," Devin requested politely. Veronica nodded curtly. "I'll need to see ID for any alcoholic beverages," she added automatically, though Devon hadn't ordered one. Just coffee, he repeated calmly. Noting that she hadn't made the same demand of the passengers ahead, she returned moments later, setting Gerald's ginger ale down with care and practically dropping Devon's coffee onto his tray, causing it to slosh over the edge and stain his tailored charcoal gray trousers. "I apologize," she said, though her tone lacked any real sincerity. She handed him a flimsy cocktail napkin rather than the cloth ones other first-class passengers received. "It's fine," Devon replied, dabbing at the dark stains spreading across the expensive fabric. It wasn't fine, of course. This was one of his best suits, a necessity for high-stakes client meetings. Zoe's wide eyes met his. "Daddy, your suit. Nothing to worry about," he said softly, though they both knew it wouldn't come clean easily. As Veronica continued down the aisle, her interactions with other passengers were noticeably warmer. Devon discreetly opened his phone and began documenting the incidents in his notes app. Years of navigating predominantly white professional spaces had taught him the value of quiet, thorough documentation. The disparity in treatment only became more glaring as boarding continued. Sophia Chen, the other attendant, distributed warm towels, pausing to chat with some passengers, but barely making eye contact as she wordlessly extended the basket toward Devon. When she moved away, Zoe leaned in. "Daddy, why doesn't she like us?" she asked, her small voice cracking Devon's composure before he could craft an age-appropriate answer. Gerald cleared his throat. "I couldn't help overhearing," the older man murmured. "I've been watching this. It's troubling." Devon gave a slight nod of acknowledgement, but kept his tone light. "We're fine," he said, not wanting to engage too directly while Zoe was listening. But it took him back to the early years at Hamilton and Brooks Architecture. Before he opened his own firm, hired for his designs, often mistaken for a messenger. Client meetings where he'd arrive early to claim a seat at the table, lest someone ask him to fetch coffee. His mentor, Richard Hamilton, had once pulled him aside. "I see what you deal with, Devon. It's not right, but how you respond defines your career. Document everything. Build allies. Choose your battles. And when you fight, make sure you win." He'd lived by those words, but with Zoe sitting beside him, small and watchful, the stakes had never felt heavier as the captain announced imminent departure. Sophia began the safety demonstration while Veronica checked seatbelts and tray tables. When she reached their row, she paused. "Double quotes, sir. May I see your boarding pass again?" Devon didn't flinch. "You've already verified it twice," he replied evenly. "It's procedure," she insisted, loud enough for nearby passengers to notice. He retrieved his boarding pass for the third time and handed it over. She studied it unnecessarily long, then added, "And verification you're traveling with this child." Devon felt his pulse spike, but kept his face impassive. "Our passports, which you've already checked twice, confirmed we share the same last name. I'm her father." Gerald shifted in his seat, uncomfortable. Once airborne, the pattern continued. Veronica served other passengers drinks and warm nuts with ease and light conversation. When she reached their row, she placed Devon's items abruptly and, as if on cue, said loudly, "Is this credit card actually yours? I'll need to verify ID for our records." A few heads turned. Devon provided his ID without comment. Again, by now, even previously oblivious passengers had begun to notice the differential scrutiny. Sophia, watching from the galley, frowned slightly, but didn't intervene. When the premial announcement came, Veronica approached their row yet again. "Sir, I need to verify your ID once more. There seems to be a discrepancy in our system." Devon's patience wore thin. "What specific discrepancy?" he asked, voice steady but edged. "This is the fourth time you've asked me for identification on this flight. I'm just following protocol," Veronica replied stiffly. What protocol requires multiple ID checks of the same first-class passenger after boarding? The tension was no longer private. Zoe shrank in her seat, clutching Captain Finn tightly against her chest, sensing the hostility she couldn't yet name. "Sir, if you continue to be difficult," Devon repeated, his tone still conversational, but steel underlying every syllable. Veronica's lips pressed into a tight line. Devon met her stare. Every inch the composed, successful, dangerous to underestimate black man he had spent a lifetime learning how to be. "I suggest," he said, "you either state the specific regulation you're invoking, or leave us to enjoy this flight like every other passenger in this cabin." A beat of silence. Then Veronica turned on her heel and stalked away. Gerald exhaled heavily. Sophia approached quietly and placed a fresh linen napkin beside Devon's drink. She didn't say a word, but the glance she gave him spoke volumes. Devon glanced down at Zoe, who still clutched her stuffed bear. He reached over and gently took her hand. "Remember this, sweetheart," he said softly. "Sometimes people won't treat you right, no matter how polite you are or how well you behave. But how you carry yourself, that's yours to keep." "I'll need to speak with the captain," Devon said, his voice even. "And I'm simply asking, which airline protocol are you following? As a frequent flyer with your airline, I'm not familiar with this particular procedure." The confrontation hung in the air. Other passengers openly watched now, their conversations fading. Zoe's eyes brimmed with tears, the situation becoming increasingly distressing despite Devon's careful efforts to shield her. Gerald Whitfield shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his face a canvas of conflicted emotions, a man wrestling with whether to intervene in a situation that had passed from mere poor service into something unmistakably darker. For Devon, each petty indignity brought back echoes of others, being asked if he was delivering food when arriving at a client's home to discuss renovation plans, stopped by campus security while white students walked past unbothered, followed in high-end stores while wearing his best suit. But this time was different. This time Zoe was watching. This time she was learning, and Devon knew what she witnessed now would shape what she came to expect from the world, whether she'd internalize mistreatment as something to endure, or learn to meet it head-on. As the meal service began, the air in the first-class cabin was tight with tension. Devon could feel it nearing a breaking point. And one thing was certain: whatever happened next, it wouldn't be his daughter's sense of self-worth that gave way. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Rivera speaking. We're experiencing a slight delay in our meal service due to some turbulence ahead. Please remain seated with your seat belts fastened when the sign is illuminated. Our flight attendants will resume service shortly." The announcement provided a brief respite, a temporary pause in the mounting pressure. Devon leaned over to Zoe. "How about we start that movie you were excited about?" he offered, attempting to recreate a pocket of normalcy. Zoe nodded, though her usual spark was missing. Her small fingers still clutched Captain Finn, the worn stuffed bear she carried everywhere. "Okay, Dad." He helped her navigate to the film's opening credits, then stood. "I'm going to use the restroom before the seatbelt sign comes on. You good for a minute?" "I'll be fine," she said with quiet maturity, a quality Devon both admired and mourned, a reminder of what she'd already weathered in her short life. In the solitude of the first-class lavatory, Devon allowed his carefully maintained facade to slip. He gripped the sink's edge, staring at his reflection. The dried coffee stain on his trousers stood out against the charcoal gray, an indelible mark of the day's indignities. He thought of Jessica, what she would have said in this moment. "Don't let them steal your joy," she'd told Zoe again and again. "Stand tall, speak truth, and remember who you are." In those final months, as cancer stripped away everything but her clarity, she'd made Devon promise something beyond giving Zoe opportunities. "Promise me you'll teach her to face the world as it is, not as we wish it would be." but also teach her that she has the power to change it. Devon splashed water on his face, straightened his tie, and carefully restored his expression. Whatever happened next, he would handle it the way Jessica would expect. When he returned to his seat, the sight stopped him cold. Veronica was leaning over his empty chair, speaking directly to Zoe. "Sweetheart, who are you traveling with today?" she asked, her voice sticky sweet, a performance that barely concealed its condescension. Zoe, eyes wide with confusion and distress, clutched Captain Finn tighter. "My dad," she answered, voice trembling, tears welling. "And where did you meet the man you're traveling with?" Veronica pressed, the implication unmistakable. Zoe's tears spilled over. "He's my dad," she repeated, voice cracking. "What exactly is happening here?" Devon demanded, his voice sharp and cutting through the charged silence. Around them, the entire cabin had gone still. Veronica straightened, her expression composed. "I was simply checking on your daughter's welfare," she replied smoothly. "Standard procedure when a child is traveling. Standard procedure is to interrogate a child while her father's in the restroom," Devon countered, stepping past her and kneeling beside Zoe. The little girl immediately threw her arms around him. "She kept asking me questions." "Daddy," Zoe whispered, burying her face against his chest. "She didn't believe you're my dad." Something inside Devon shifted. A line crossed. He had tolerated the repeated ID checks, the coffee incident, the thinly veiled suspicion. But making his child cry, casting doubt on their bond in front of strangers, making her feel unsafe, was unforgivable. Gerald Whitfield finally spoke. "This is completely unprofessional," he stated, his voice carrying through the cabin. "I've been watching this develop since boarding. There's a clear pattern here." "This doesn't concern you, sir," Veronica replied curtly. "Actually, it does," Gerald said evenly. "As a fellow passenger, I expect this airline to treat all its customers with equal respect." Other passengers murmured in agreement. The cabin's mood had shifted, the subtle indifference replaced with discomfort and dawning awareness. Devon wiped the tears from Zoe's cheeks. "It's okay, baby. I'm right here." He remembered Jessica's frail hand in his, her fierce voice in those last months. "Promise me." And in that moment, his resolve crystallized. With one arm around Zoe, Devon looked up at Veronica. "This stops now," he said, his voice quiet but steel-edged. "Since boarding this flight, you've repeatedly singled me out. You've demanded additional identification without cause. You spilled coffee on me without apology. You've questioned my presence in this cabin. And now you've interrogated my daughter while I was in the restroom." Veronica's mouth tightened. "Sir, if you continue to be disruptive, documenting discriminatory treatment is not being disruptive." Devon replied calmly. "I've recorded every interaction since boarding, including timestamps and witnesses." Sophia, the other attendant, finally stepped forward. "Veronica, perhaps we should. I have this handled," Veronica snapped. Passengers were no longer pretending to ignore it. Heads craned, eyes fixed on the unfolding scene. "Sir, please, lower your voice and return to your seat." "You're disturbing the other passengers," Veronica ordered. "You mean these passengers?" Gerald asked, gesturing around him. "Because it seems to me, ma'am, you're the one disturbing the cabin." More murmurs. A woman in row 2 nodded. A businessman across the aisle cleared his throat pointedly. Devon reached for his phone. "What are you doing?" Veronica demanded. "Making a call," he said simply. "Phones must be in airplane mode during flight," she said, with a triumphant edge. "Actually," Gerald interjected, lifting his own phone, "the FAA permits devices in airplane mode, and this seems like a situation worth documenting." A beat. Then, Sophia quietly, but firmly, stepped forward again. "Veronica," she said, her voice tight, "I need you to come to the galley, now." Veronica hesitated, then turned and stalked away. Devon glanced at Zoe, still trembling in his arms, and knew this wasn't over. But for now, it was enough. "It's okay, sweetheart," he murmured. "I'm right here. I've got you." And as the plane hummed through the darkening sky, Devon made another promise, not just to Jessica this time, but to himself and to Zoe. This world might be what it is, but she would never have to accept it. Quietly on the morning show, Heather Winters appeared teary-eyed as she described receiving death threats after being canceled for doing her job. The host nodded sympathetically, never challenging her version of events or the airline's long history of similar complaints. "They're playing hardball," Patricia muttered, reading over Zoe's shoulder. "So are we," Zoe replied. Her inbox was flooded dozens of messages from Pinnacle clients, many expressing concern over the company's association with the controversy. But not all were negative. 3 major clients, collectively worth more than Atlantic's business, had written to express support for Zoe's stance, stating clearly they valued working with companies that showed integrity in how they handled discrimination. It was a small but powerful shift. The boardroom doors opened. Richard Evans stepped out, face unreadable. "They're ready for you." Zoe rose, smoothing the front of her crimson suit. "No matter what happens, thank you for this opportunity." He gave her a short nod and led her into the room. 14 people sat around the table, 12 board members, Brandon Pierce, and a woman in a severe black suit, likely Atlantic's legal counsel. William Grant gave her an encouraging nod as she took her position at the head of the table. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. "Ms. Robinson," said Eleanor Blackwell, the board chairwoman, "we've asked you here to address concerns about your recent public statements regarding Atlantic Airways, a valued Pinnacle client. The floor is yours." Zoe placed her speech on the table, but didn't open it. Instead, she looked directly at Pierce. "Mr. Pierce, how many racial profiling complaints has Atlantic Airways received in the last 5 years? Pierce's face paled. "That's confidential company information." "Is it 73? Zoe asked. "Because that's the number I found through public records and social media reports." The Atlantic attorney leaned forward. "Ms. Robinson, making unsubstantiated allegations could constitute defamation." "These aren't allegations," Zoe interrupted calmly. "They're documented complaints, many with video evidence. And what's notable isn't just the incidents, it's Atlantic's response. Private settlements, NDAs, and no meaningful change." She turned to face the board. Her voice was steady, clear. "You're not just deciding whether to promote me today. You're deciding whether Pinnacle Industries values ethical business practices and equal treatment more than comfortable relationships with clients who engage in discriminatory behavior." Several board members shifted uncomfortably. William Grant leaned forward. "Ms. Robinson raises a valid point. Atlantic's contract with Pinnacle includes an ethics clause. Either party can invoke it if the other engages in discriminatory practices." Pierce slammed his hand on the table. "This is outrageous. One incident with one employee does not constitute a pattern." "One incident," Zoe repeated, pulling out her phone. "Yesterday, after my interview aired, I received hundreds of messages from black professionals describing similar experiences on Atlantic flights." She began reading a few. A neurosurgeon questioned about his first-class ticket. An attorney asked to show additional ID twice. A black executive's bag searched while white passengers boarded without a glance. As Zoe read, the mood in the room began to shift. What had been framed as an isolated event now clearly resembled a systemic pattern. "Pinnacle has built its reputation on integrity," Zoe continued. "That reputation is worth more than any single client contract. The question is, are willing to uphold that value when it's no longer convenient?" Pierce stood. "This is a setup. You're deliberately damaging Atlantic's reputation to advance your own career." "Mr. Pierce," Eleanor interrupted, voice sharp, Please control yourself, for you'll be asked to leave. The attorney beside him whispered something urgent. Reluctantly, Pierce sat seething. Zoe returned to her prepared remarks. She spoke briefly about her qualifications, her record, and her vision for Pinnacle's future. When she finished, Eleanor thanked her and asked her to wait outside. In the hallway, Zoe checked her phone. The story was exploding. Multiple media outlets were now reporting that Atlantic employees had leaked internal documents revealing a policy of flagging passengers who appear out of place, a vague directive that disproportionately impacted travelers of color. A text from William appeared. Pierce stormed out. Vote happening now. 40-5. Agonizing minutes passed. Finally, Richard emerged. His face was serious. The board has reached a decision. They'd like to inform you personally. Back inside, the atmosphere had changed. Some board members avoided her eyes. Others met her gaze with quiet respect. Eleanor Blackwell addressed her. Ms. Robinson, the board appreciates your candor and courage in addressing these difficult issues. After careful consideration, we've decided to— She paused, glancing around the table. Postpone the director announcement until the current media situation has stabilized. The words struck like a blow, but Zoe didn't flinch. I understand, she said quietly. Thank you for your consideration. We hope you'll continue your excellent work at Pinnacle, Eleanor added, her tone perfunctory, while we monitor developments. The corporate euphemisms didn't disguise the truth. They weren't willing to stand firmly against discrimination, not when it threatened their bottom line. The captain hadn't asked passengers to power down electronics yet. They were still at the gate, delayed. Devon picked up his phone. Zoe looked up at him, her eyes still glassy with tears but searching his face now, sensing something had shifted. Devon gave her a steady smile. Remember Uncle Theo? He asked softly. Zoe nodded. Your friend who's a lawyer. That's right. I think it's time we gave him a call. Devon dialed Theodore's number, holding the phone where Veronica could clearly see he wasn't bluffing. It rang twice before Theodore answered. Devon, aren't you supposed to be in the air to Seattle by now? That was the plan, Devon replied, keeping his voice calm, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. But there's a situation here I could use your professional advice on. Theodore's tone shifted instantly. I'm listening. What's going on? Devon laid out everything. The questioning at check-in, the extra screening, repeated ID demands, the seating issue, the coffee spill, and finally, Veronica interrogating Zoe while he was in the restroom. As Devon spoke, Veronica's defensive posture began to falter. Nearby passengers exchanged glances, a few nodding in quiet confirmation of Devon's account. I see, Theodore said when Devon finished, and this pattern has been consistent from one individual. Yes, Devon confirmed. Other passengers haven't been treated this way. It's isolated to us. Put me on speaker, Theodore instructed. Devon obliged, angling the phone so Veronica and several nearby passengers could hear. This is Theodore Washington, attorney at law, Theodore began, his voice carrying the weight of authority. To whom am I speaking? Veronica hesitated, her voice tighter now. Veronica Winters, lead flight attendant. Ms. Winters, Theodore continued smoothly. Are you aware that your conduct constitutes a documented pattern of discriminatory behavior in violation of both federal law and your airline's policies regarding equal treatment of passengers? I was following security procedures, Veronica said stiffly. Interesting, Theodore replied. I'd like to review those specific procedures, requiring multiple ID checks of the same passenger post-boarding, separating a minor from a parent with confirmed documentation, and interrogating a child about their relationship to a parent while that parent is absent. Sophia, who had been lingering nearby, took a tentative step forward. I can confirm those are not standard protocols, she said, her voice low but clear, her discomfort obvious. I've noticed the inconsistency in service as well. Devon gave her a quiet nod as she discreetly slipped a business card onto his tray. I'll provide a formal statement, Sophia added. Gerald Whitfield leaned in too. As would I, he stated firmly. I've witnessed this entire situation. Theodore's tone remained measured. Devon, as your attorney, let me remind you of your rights. You're entitled to request the immediate involvement of a customer service supervisor, file a formal complaint, and pursue legal remedies for the emotional harm inflicted on you and your daughter. And for the record, Theodore added, I'm currently representing the National Civil Rights Coalition in a federal case addressing discriminatory practices in the transportation industry. What you've experienced today mirrors the exact patterns we're challenging in court. The cabin's mood shifted perceptibly. Passengers who'd once averted their eyes now leaned in, recognizing this was no routine customer service dispute. Theodore continued, and, Devon, you're traveling to Seattle for the Riverfront Development Corporation project, correct? The same corporation whose CEO happens to sit on your airline's board. Yes, Devon confirmed, a flicker of panic crossed Veronica's face. And isn't your firm also leading the National Civil Rights Museum expansion? The one I'm chairing? That's right, Devon said, the full scope of his standing now unmistakable to everyone within earshot. Most didn't know the history between Devon and Theodore, how they'd met as freshman roommates at Cornell, bonded by shared experiences in a world too often rigged against them. Back then, it was Theodore who'd helped Devon document a pattern of biased grading by a professor. It had been Theodore's first real case, years before law school. I'm going to loop in Janelle from our legal team now, Theodore said, and I'll reach out to Charlotte Jensen. We spoke on a corporate diversity panel last month. Veronica's voice faltered. Who's Charlotte Jensen? Your airline's CEO, Theodore answered. A soft gasp from Sophia confirmed the weight of that revelation. Theodore paused. Double quotes now. Devon, as your counsel, I need to ask, what outcome are you seeking here? Devon glanced down at Zoe, still curled against him, watching every word with wide, tear-rimmed eyes. He gave her a reassuring squeeze, then met Theodore's question. Head-on. Zoe watched her father with wide, steady eyes. The tears were gone now, replaced by quiet admiration, as she took in the way Devon handled the situation, calm/firm, unflinching. Devon took a breath, choosing his words carefully before answering Theodore's question. I want acknowledgement for the discriminatory treatment we've endured, he said, his voice clear and steady. I want appropriate accountability for those responsible, and I want assurance that no other family will be subjected to the same experience. And more than anything, he added, glancing at his daughter, I want my little girl to see that standing up for yourself matters, that it can make a difference. Have you ever had to make a tough call like that, advocating for yourself or a loved one? Drop a 1 if you've had to stand firm in the face of unfair treatment, or a 2 if you've been fortunate enough to avoid it. And if you admire Devon's strategy and composure in handling this, hit that like button and subscribe to follow how this story unfolds. Justice might be turning the tide, but will it be enough? I'm setting up a conference call with the airline's general counsel, Theodore announced through the speakerphone. They should be on shortly. In the meantime, Devon, keep documenting everything. The mood in the first-class cabin had shifted entirely. What had begun as quiet discomfort at a public conflict had transformed into a collective understanding. This was more than a customer service issue. It was a stand against something wrong, and the cabin knew it. Devon nodded, though Theodore couldn't see him. Thank you, Theo. Turning to Veronica, whose composure had cracked visibly, Devon spoke, his tone calm but unyielding. My daughter and I will leave this aircraft unless this situation is addressed immediately. I will not subject her to any further mistreatment. His words drew a clear, firm line, not hostile, but resolute. An elderly woman in the front row turned in her seat. "Young man, I've watched this from the start. It's shameful how you've been treated. I'd be happy to give my information as a witness." Several passengers murmured in agreement. The tide of public opinion had shifted decisively. Veronica's face reddened as she realized she was no longer in control of the narrative. "Sir, there's no need to deplane. If you'll just return to your seat." "Excuse me," Gerald Whitfield interrupted smoothly. "I think there very much is a need for a meaningful resolution here." He handed Devon a business card. "Gerald Whitfield, senior correspondent for Business Weekly. I'm not traveling professionally today, but this is a story about corporate accountability I won't ignore." Devon accepted the card with a grateful nod, suddenly understanding why Gerald's gaze had felt so analytical throughout. Sophia stepped forward again, her voice steady now. "I've notified the lead purser. And the captain? They're aware of the situation." She lowered her voice slightly. "Captain Rivera would like to speak with you, Ms. Winters." A new announcement crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Rivera. We apologize for the continued delay as we work to resolve a situation on board. Thank you for your patience." Everyone knew exactly what situation he was referring to. Veronica's radio chirped, and she turned away to answer it, her shoulders rigid. In the momentary quiet, Devon looked at Zoe. "You okay, sweetheart?" She nodded, her expression thoughtful, and older than her 8 years. "You're not letting them be mean to us," she said quietly, "like Mom would want." The simple truth in her words hit Devon in the chest, a lump rising in his throat. Even at 8, Zoe understood what was happening, and what mattered. "That's right," he whispered, brushing her cheek. "We deserve respect, same as anyone." Around them, passengers began voicing their own observations. "I noticed the way she spoke to you versus me," said a man across the aisle. "I should have said something earlier. She checked your ID 4 times, never asked for mine once." Another passenger added, "That questioning of your daughter was completely inappropriate." An older woman declared, "I worked in child welfare for 30 years. That wasn't safeguarding. That was harassment." The atmosphere shifted again, from silent discomfort to collective recognition. Then Theodore's voice came through the phone once more. "Devon, I've got James Peterson, the airline's general counsel, on the line. He'd like to speak with you." A new voice joined the call. "Mr. Reynolds, this is James Peterson, General Counsel for Atlantic Airways. I understand there's been a serious issue with your treatment on board today." "That's correct," Devon replied evenly, and began recounting the events again, clear, factual, precise. The conversation, and the fight for justice, had officially escalated to the highest level. This wasn't just about his dignity anymore. It was about Zoe's comfort, her dignity, and what kind of world she would grow up believing she deserved. Devon looked at his daughter. "I'm okay if you are, Dad," Zoe whispered. That simple exchange settled it. "We'll continue to Seattle as planned," Devon told Theodore, as Veronica was quietly escorted off the plane, her earlier authority visibly stripped away. Sophia stepped into the lead flight attendant role with calm professionalism. The rest of the crew, clearly aware of what had transpired, went out of their way to ensure the comfort of every passenger, especially Devon and Zoe. When the aircraft finally pushed back from the gate, nearly an hour behind schedule, a spontaneous round of applause rippled through the first-class cabin. Not for the airline, not for the delay, but for the father and daughter whose dignity had stood firm in the face of discrimination. As the plane began taxiing, Zoe leaned against her. "Father, Dad," she murmured, "I think you just changed how they see us." The quiet weight of her observation settled over Devon. She was right, and it reminded him why he hadn't let this pass. Why silence hadn't been an option. This wasn't just about him. It was for Zoe, for Jessica's memory, for everyone who'd been made to feel lesser in places they had every right to belong. As the aircraft took off, Devon felt something shift inside, a sense that even small stands, witnessed by a few, could ripple outward in ways he might never fully see. At cruising altitude, the usual announcements resumed, but the cabin atmosphere was transformed. Sophia led the service with warmth and grace, treating every passenger with identical courtesy. The earlier tension was gone, replaced by a rare sense of community. Soon after, Megan Clark, the regional manager who had remained on board, approached Devon's seat. "Mr. Reynolds," she began, her tone noticeably different from her earlier corporate veneer. "I wanted to personally apologize for what you and your daughter experienced today." Devon nodded, appreciating the sincerity, now replacing defensiveness. "Thank you. She also asked me to pass this along," Megan said, handing him a business card with a handwritten note on the back. It was from Charlotte Jensen, the airline's CEO, requesting to discuss his suggestions for improving their training programs once he returned from Seattle. Passengers nearby watched the exchange. The earlier power dynamic, completely reversed. Devon, once dismissed, was now being sought out by the airline's leadership. "I also have something for Zoe," Megan added, producing a small model airplane and a plush toy wearing a pilot's cap. "It's not much, but we want her to know she's welcome on our flights." Zoe accepted the gifts with a shy smile. "Thank you." As Megan stepped away, Gerald Whitfield leaned across the aisle. "Quite a turn of events," he remarked. "I hope you don't mind. I've been taking notes. There's a bigger story here about corporate culture, accountability, and the power of speaking up." Devon gave a small, appreciative smile. "I don't mind. Just focus on the systemic issues. This isn't just about us." "Absolutely," Gerald agreed. "Your experience is one example of a much wider problem, but it's an important one." The meal service followed, this time living up to the premium expectations. Sophia ensured. Devon and Zoe's meals were served first as a quiet gesture of acknowledgement. Crew members stopped by with genuine warmth. Halfway through the flight, Theodore called back. Devon excused himself to the galley for privacy. "How's it going?" Theodore asked. "Total turnaround," Devon said, honestly. "It's surreal." "It's not surreal," Theodore replied. "It's what should have happened from the start." "Oh, and Charlotte Jensen called me after speaking with you. She's taking this seriously." "I gathered as much," Devon said. "There's something else you should know," Theodore continued. "I didn't mention it earlier because we were focused on the immediate issue, but your firm's on the short list for the Atlantic Airways terminal expansion." Devon blinked. He hadn't known. That level of discussion usually happened quietly at the executive level. "That's why Jensen moved so fast," Theodore explained. "They can't afford a PR nightmare or to alienate one of the country's top black architects when they're trying to highlight diversity on a high-profile project." It was a sobering reminder that corporate decisions often balanced ethics with strategy. Devon wanted to believe the response was purely principled, but he was experienced enough to recognize nuance. "And one more thing," Theodore added. "Gerald Whitfield isn't just any journalist. He's working on a series about corporate America's diversity failures. You couldn't have planned better coverage if you tried." When Devon returned to his seat, Zoe was happily chatting with a flight attendant about marine biology, her earlier distress replaced by excitement for their Seattle adventure. The resilience of children always amazed him with safety and validation. They bounced back fast. Throughout the flight, passengers stopped by to offer their cards, witness statements, or quiet words of solidarity. An older black couple paused at their row. "What you did today matters," the man said quietly. "Our generation endured too much in silence. Seeing you stand up like that gives us hope." It reminded Devon of his parents, their quiet dignity, their choice to endure, for the sake of survival and progress. That path had carried him through Cornell and into a successful career. But Zoe's world was different. Silence no longer felt like the right option. about an hour before landing. The captain's voice came over the intercom once more. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Rivera. I want to personally thank you for your patience today. Atlantic Airways will be providing each of you with a travel voucher as a token of appreciation. More importantly, I want to acknowledge," the announcement continued, but Devon didn't hear the rest. Zoe had fallen asleep against his shoulder, a soft smile on her face. And for the first time in a long time, Devon felt a different kind of peace, the kind that comes not from avoiding conflict, but from meeting it head-on and refusing to be diminished. "That our airline fell short of its values today, Captain." Rivera's voice came through the cabin speakers. "As captain of this aircraft, I take full responsibility for everything that happens on board, and I extend my personal apology to the Reynolds family." The announcement was met with another spontaneous round of applause. The passengers understood the weight of such a public acknowledgement. It was rare, unprecedented even. Moments later, Captain Rivera himself stepped out of the cockpit and made his way directly to Devon's seat. Extending his hand, he spoke clearly. "Mr. Reynolds, I wanted to apologize in person. There's absolutely no place for what happened today. Not on my aircraft, not in this company." Devon stood and shook the offered hand. "I appreciate that, Captain." A warm smile crossed Rivera's face as he glanced at Zoe. "I understand. Your daughter mentioned to one of our flight attendants that she's interested in marine biology. The first officer and I were wondering if you both might like to visit the cockpit before we land. We've got a beautiful view of the Pacific coming into Seattle." Zoe's eyes lit up. "Can we, Dad?" Devon smiled, recognizing the invitation for what it was, a sincere gesture, and a powerful symbolic reversal of the exclusion they'd faced just hours earlier. Of course. As they followed Captain Rivera to the front of the aircraft, Devon's phone buzzed. A new email had arrived. The subject line read, "Atlantic Airways official statement for your approval before release." Curious, he opened it as they reached the cockpit door. The draft statement was direct and unflinching. It acknowledged the discriminatory treatment Devon and Zoe had endured, detailed immediate actions, including Veronica's suspension, mandatory company-wide training enhancements, and a six-figure donation to the National Civil Rights Museum. Most significantly, it explicitly named anti-black racism as the issue, refusing to bury the incident under vague language about regrettable misunderstandings. Devon forwarded the draft to Theodore with a short note. Progress in the cockpit. First Officer Chen welcomed them, showing Zoe how the instruments worked as Captain Rivera pointed out landmarks below the silvery curve of the Pacific coastline, the snowy peak of Mount Rainier in the distance. Zoe's questions came rapid-fire, her earlier anxiety forgotten, replaced by childlike curiosity and joy. "She's incredibly bright," Captain Rivera remarked as they prepared to head back to their seats for landing. Devon smiled, feeling something settle inside him. The experience hadn't erased what happened, but it had transformed the ending. It was a reminder that when people refused to stay silent, when they stood up not just for themselves, but for those watching, real, tangible change could follow. And, sometimes, an 8-year-old could help lead the way. The way she picked up the navigation system so quickly, impressive. Captain Rivera remarked as Zoe eagerly absorbed every detail of the cockpit. Devon smiled, the familiar bittersweet ache tugging at him. "She gets her intelligence from her mother," he replied, the mention of Jessica always carrying both pride and loss. "Well," the captain said, glancing at Zoe with a warm smile, "she's lucky to have a father who stands up for her the way you did today. The way you handled it, that's something she'll carry with her for the rest of her life." As they made their way back to their seats, Devon realized the captain was right. This had become one of those defining days, a moment that would shape how Zoe understood dignity, fairness, and the courage it sometimes took to claim both. When they reached first class, Sophia greeted them. "Mr. Reynolds," she said. "Ms. Jensen is on the line again and would like to speak with you before we land." Devon accepted the call. Charlotte Jensen's voice was steady, her words carefully chosen. "I wanted to personally thank you, Mr. Reynolds," she began. "Not just for your patience, but for holding us accountable. In addition to the actions we've already shared, we'll be launching a comprehensive review of our training protocols, analyzing customer complaint data to identify systemic issues. And if you're willing, we'd like to retain your firm to consult on designing more inclusive, equitable spaces within our airports." There was a pause. Then she added, "Sometimes it takes a clear, painful example of where we've failed to illuminate the path forward. I hope you'll help us chart it." Devon considered it, his mind already turning over possibilities. "I'll be in touch once I'm back from Seattle," he said, as they prepared for landing. Gerald Whitfield passed Devon a business card, a handwritten note on the back. "Your story deserves to be told properly. Let's talk when you're ready." Outside the window, Seattle's skyline emerged. From the clouds, the iconic Space Needle piercing the horizon. Zoe pressed her face to the glass, her earlier fear replaced by excitement. "Dad," she whispered, as the wheels touched down at SeaTac, "I think today was important, wasn't it?" Devon reached for her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. Double quotes, "Yes, sweetheart. Today was very important." The aircraft taxied to the gate, but before the seatbelt sign dimmed, Sophia made one final announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Captain Rivera and our entire crew, we thank you for flying with us today. As you deplane, our customer service team will have information regarding the travel vouchers added to your accounts, and we want to sincerely thank you for your patience and understanding during today's events." As passengers began gathering their belongings, many paused to shake Devon's hand or offer quiet words of support. The same crowd that had once watched his humiliation in uncomfortable silence now bore witness to his dignity and resolve, and perhaps, in that process, experienced their own quiet education about how discrimination hides in plain sight, waiting to be named. Devon helped Zoe collect her backpack, and Captain Finn, reflecting on how differently this day had unfolded from what he'd anticipated. What began as a simple business trip had become a moment with ripple effects he was only beginning to understand. As they reached the jet bridge, Zoe glanced up at him, her expression earnest and older than her years. "Dad," she said softly, "I'm proud of you." No corporate apology, no contract opportunity, no media coverage could match the simple, searing power of those words. A week later, under Seattle's gray summer sky, Devon and Zoe wandered through Pike Place Market. The riverfront development contract had been secured, and with a few extra days built in for adventure, they'd been free to explore. "Dad, look." Zoe pointed toward a newspaper stand, excitement in her voice. There, prominently displayed, was the latest issue of Business Weekly. Across its cover, in bold lettering, "Flying while black, one family's stand against discrimination sparks industry reckoning." Gerald Whitfield had kept his promise. The article wasn't a tabloid drama about a single incident. It was a thoughtful, unflinching exploration of how seemingly isolated moments revealed larger patterns about corporate responsibility, the role of bystanders, and the real economic and human costs of discrimination. Devon picked up a copy, feeling the weight of it in his hands. He glanced down at Zoe, who was beaming. "Guess you're famous now," she teased. He laughed softly, tucking the paper under his arm. "Not famous, kiddo, just finally seen." And together, they continued down the bustling market street, not just as travelers, but as witnesses, advocates, and a father-daughter pair forever changed by a single, hard-earned stand. Devon purchased a copy of the magazine, tucking it into his bag as they continued exploring Pike Place Market. His phone had been buzzing steadily since the article's release, interview requests, speaking invitations, and, most notably, new client inquiries from companies suddenly eager to showcase their commitment to diversity through thoughtful, inclusive architectural projects. Theodore had called that morning with updates. The airline's donation to the museum is confirmed, he'd reported, twice the amount we originally discussed. And Veronica Winters issued a public apology letter yesterday. Forced or genuine? Devon had asked, skeptical. Hard to say, Theodore admitted. But she's also enrolled in a community service program working with inner-city youth. It's technically a requirement for her continued employment, but who knows? It might actually mean something to her. The most unexpected development had come via Sophia Chen. She'd reached out to share that Atlantic Airways was implementing a comprehensive anti-bias training program designed in consultation with Devon's firm. They'd been asked to audit physical aspects of the airlines, lounges, and terminals, identifying subtle, exclusionary design elements most people never consciously noticed. "Dad, can we go see the harbor seals now?" Zoe's voice tugged him back to the present, her hand tugging at his. "Absolutely," he smiled, checking his watch. "The aquarium opens in 20 minutes. As they strolled down toward the waterfront, Devon reflected on how the incident had affected Zoe. Rather than retreating inward or growing anxious, she'd returned home, emboldened. She'd proudly shared the story with her classmates, even turning it into a school project on standing up against injustice. Her teacher had called Devon personally, moved by Zoe's articulate presentation on the importance of being an upstander, not a bystander. The project had gone on to win a district-wide citizenship award, Zoe explaining to the judging panel how her father had taught her that you could stand up for yourself without becoming what you were fighting against. The aquarium was everything Zoe had hoped for. Her journal quickly filled with sketches and notes about Pacific marine life. At the Harbor Seal exhibit, a staff marine biologist noticed her detailed observations. "You've got quite the scientist here," she remarked to Devon. "Those are some sharp notes for someone her age." "She gets it from her mother," Devon replied with familiar, bittersweet pride. Jessica was a biology professor. Impressed, the biologist ended up giving them a behind-the-scenes tour, Zoe's enthusiasm and sharp questions earning her a personal invitation to the aquarium's junior marine biologist program, one that offered online participation for out-of-state students. That evening, as twilight fell over the city, they splurged on dinner at the revolving restaurant atop the Space Needle. As the city lights shimmered below, Zoe grew contemplative, quietly stirring her virgin strawberry daiquiri. "Dad," she began, voice small, "do you think Mom knows what happened on the plane?" The question caught Devon off guard. They spoke of Jessica often, keeping her memory alive through stories and photographs. But Zoe rarely speculated about whether her mother still somehow watched over them. "What do you think?" Devon asked gently. Zoe thought it over, the city's glow reflected in her eyes. "I think she does. And I think she's proud of how you stood up without becoming like the people you were standing up to. That's what you always say she'd want." Devon swallowed hard, struck by the wisdom in his daughter's words. "I think you're right, sweetheart." 2 days later, they boarded their flight home to Atlanta. The difference in experience was unmistakable from the moment they arrived at the airport. The check-in agent greeted them warmly. Security was smooth and courteous, and when they reached the gate, the attendant welcomed them by name. "Mr. Reynolds, Ms. Reynolds, we're delighted to have you with us today. Boarding will begin in about 15 minutes. Once on board, the lead flight attendant personally escorted them to their seats, ensuring they were settled comfortably before seeing 2 other passengers. "Is this because of what happened before?" Zoe whispered, perceptive as ever. Devon considered. "In a moment. Partially," he admitted. "But this is also how everyone should be treated." The flight was uneventful in the best possible way. The crew professional, attentive without being performative, as they began their descent into Atlanta. Devon's phone buzzed with a new email from Charlotte Jensen. The subject line read, "Impact Update." The message outlined newly implemented policies, revised training protocols, a streamlined incident reporting system, and the formation of a passenger advocacy council, including diverse passenger representatives. Most meaningfully, Jensen noted that passenger complaints of discriminatory treatment had already decreased by 12% in the short time since the changes began, a sign that their experience was rippling outward in measurable ways. At Hartsfield-Jackson's baggage claim, Devon spotted a familiar face waiting in the arrivals area, Theodore, holding a small sign scrawled with family in his characteristically neat handwriting. "Uncle Theo," Zoe called, running toward him. "There's my favorite marine biologist." Theodore grinned, scooping her up, despite her ever-growing size. "I've missed you, kiddo." Devon approached, with a tired but satisfied smile. Theodore extended a hand and then pulled him into a brief, brotherly hug. "You did good, Dev," Theodore said quietly. "You did real good." And as they made their way out into the Atlanta sun, Devon felt, for the first time in a long while, that the world, while still flawed, could change. One confrontation at a time, one witness at a time, one brave little girl at a time. "What are you doing here?" Devon asked, surprised to see his friend in the arrivals area. "I thought you were in Washington until Friday." Kay's case settled early, Theodore explained, holding up his small sign with a grin. "And I wanted to welcome the celebrities home in person." Over dinner at Devon's favorite restaurant, where, in the wake of recent events, they were now treated like VIPs, Theodore shared additional news. The incident had sparked broader attention, with several legislators now drafting industry-wide passenger rights legislation, specifically addressing protections against discriminatory treatment. "Your one phone call didn't just change your flight," Theodore observed. "It might end up changing air travel for a lot of people." Later that evening, after Zoe had gone to bed, exhausted from their trip, Devon sat alone on his back deck with a glass of Jessica's favorite wine. The night was warm, the sky clear over Atlanta. He could almost feel Jessica's presence beside him, could almost hear her voice, softly reassuring. "You did good, Dev." It was remarkable, he thought, how one moment could alter so much, not only the outcome of an unpleasant incident, but potentially the way discrimination would be addressed in public spaces, where it had too often gone unchallenged. For Zoe, the experience had been equally powerful. She'd learned that dignity was non-negotiable, that justice was worth pursuing, and that one voice raised at the right moment could ignite change. Devon reflected on the journey that had brought them here, not just their trip to Seattle, but the longer arc of his life, his parents' quiet perseverance, Jessica's fierce advocacy, and now his own commitment to ensuring that Zoe would grow up in a world where she would be seen for her character, not reduced by the color of her skin. Messages had continued to pour in from people across the country, some sharing similar experiences, others offering solidarity, and many simply expressing gratitude for a story that gave them courage. That one stand, witnessed by a plane full of people, had rippled far beyond the confines of an aircraft cabin. In the end, one phone call really had changed everything. Epilogue. A lesson for us. All. This powerful story reminds us that standing up against discrimination requires both courage and strategy. Devon's response demonstrates that we can fight injustice with dignity, without compromising our values. By documenting incidents, building alliances, and knowing when to escalate, we can challenge systemic bias effectively. The most important lesson is that silence perpetuates injustice. When Devon chose to speak up, rather than endure mistreatment, he reclaimed his own dignity and set off a ripple effect that benefited countless others. His actions demanded accountability from those in power and educated bystanders who might otherwise have remained silent. For parents, this story offers another crucial truth. Our children are always watching. The way we respond to injustice teaches them to value their own worth, to stand firm against unfairness, and to hold fast to the principle that courage matters, especially when it's inconvenient. And finally, we're reminded that while change often starts with individual acts of bravery, lasting transformation requires institutional accountability, new policies, honest training, and cultural shifts within organizations. What about you? Have you ever witnessed or experienced discrimination while traveling? How did you handle it, or how would you, if faced with Devon's situation? Share your story in the comments. If this story resonated with you, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, powerful stories about everyday people standing up against injustice. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a new chapter in this ongoing conversation. Because sometimes, one phone call, one moment of courage, really can change the world. Stay strong, keep standing up, and keep believing in better.